There are days when the world keeps moving, but something inside you doesn't follow. Days when you wake up in a familiar bedroom, in a familiar American life, and yet your chest feels like an empty hallway no one has walked through in years. You lie there for a few seconds, listening to the hum of your refrigerator, the muted traffic on your street, the dull rhythm of a life that used to feel like yours. But nothing lands, nothing moves, nothing stirs. It's strange how silence can exist even in a place filled with noise. You get out of bed, not because you want to, but because the day has expectations. Work emails, grocery lists, bills, responsibilities that don't care whether or not your inner world has gone offline. You do what adults in this country do. You show up, or at least, you impersonate the version of you who used to show up. But beneath the functioning, there's a kind of quiet collapse, a soft implosion that no one else notices because it makes no sound. People around you think you're fine. You respond when spoken to. You nod in the right moments. You smile just enough to avoid questions. But you know there's something hollow behind your eyes. Something that used to glow, now dimmed into a kind of half-existence. Not sadness, not despair, just absence. That's the part no one warns you about. The way emotional exhaustion doesn't always feel like drowning. Sometimes it feels like floating, drifting so far from yourself that the world becomes a movie you're watching, not a life you're living. And the scariest part is how normal it starts to feel. You stop expecting to be moved by anything. You stop waiting for excitement, or connection, or joy. You adjust to life in grayscale, you learn how to function with your heart on mute, and because you're still technically okay, nobody knows that something crucial has gone missing inside you. This kind of fatigue isn't loud. It doesn't make you cry into your pillow. It shows up as the absence of something you can't name, a faded keystroke, a muted guitar string, a narrowing of the inner space where your emotions used to stretch. And, if you're honest, you don't remember the exact moment it started. You just remember waking up one day and realizing the world didn't go quiet. You did. Maybe life has been demanding too much for too long. Maybe you've been running on fumes for years without noticing how little fuel was left. Or maybe your nervous system, pushed beyond its capacity, finally made a decision without asking for your permission to shut down the parts of you that were overheating. This isn't laziness. This isn't weakness. This isn't a lack of discipline or ambition. This is what happens when your inner world grows tired of being in survival mode. In a culture that worships productivity and constant motion, emotional numbness is easy to misinterpret. You tell yourself you're just tired or uninspired or in a weird phase. But deep down, there's a feeling you can't shake, a sense that something precious inside you has quietly slipped away. You miss the version of yourself who used to care. You miss the spark, the curiosity, the pulse of aliveness. You miss waking up and feeling like your life had weight, color, texture, and yet you don't know how to get back there. You don't know where the path disappeared. You only know that existing like this feels like walking through your own life with your hands slightly lifted, as if reaching for something you can't quite touch. This is the core pain most people never talk about, not depression, not crisis, but the slow erosion of feeling, the emotional thinning that turns your inner world into a quiet room without lights, the pain of becoming a spectator in your own life. There's a moment late one evening, one of those quiet Pacific Northwest nights where the sky hangs low and the air smells like rain, when you find yourself standing in your kitchen without remembering why you walked in. The overhead light hums softly. The countertops are clean. The house is still. Everything looks exactly the same as it always does. But it feels different, like someone has pressed a sheet of glass between you and the world. You lean against the counter, palms flat on the cool surface, and stare at the small window above the sink. Outside, the streets of Portland glow with that faint orange haze from the street lamps. A few cars pass in the distance. A neighbor walks their dog. Somewhere in the city, someone is laughing, someone is arguing, someone is falling in love. Life is happening everywhere. You're close enough to see it, but too far away to feel any of it. It's not dramatic. There's no breakdown, no cinematic moment of collapse. Just a growing, expanding emptiness, like your emotions have quietly packed a bag and left the house without telling you where they were going. You open the refrigerator, even though you're not hungry. Rows of groceries stare back at you: milk, blueberries, leftover takeout in a brown paper box. You bought these things because you were supposed to, because you're an adult, because that's what functioning people do. But as you stand there, cold air brushing your face, you realize you don't feel connected to any of it. Not the food, not the routine, not the life it represents. You shut the door, and the room returns to silence. Your phone buzzes on the counter, a message from a friend asking if you want to grab coffee this weekend. You stare at the screen for a long moment, feeling nothing, not dread, not excitement, just a kind of neutral fog. You type, "Yeah, sounds good," because it's easier than trying to explain the truth. And the truth is that every interaction has started to feel like acting. Not lying, just performing a version of yourself you don't fully inhabit anymore. You walk into the living room. The lamp gives off a warm glow, but it doesn't warm you. You sit on the couch, but it doesn't comfort you. You scroll through streaming platforms, but everything feels like static, hundreds of stories, none of which you have the energy to enter. The world keeps offering you experiences, the way a tide offers shells to a shoreline. But you can't pick anything up. You can't hold anything long enough to feel its texture. You glance at the bookshelf across the room. There's a novel you used to love, pages stained from Portland rain, a corner folded where you once paused because a sentence hit you too hard. You hold the book in your hands, hoping the past version of you might echo through it, but now even the memory feels muted. It's strange, the way emotional numbness steals life not by taking things away, but by dissolving the bridge between you and the things you still technically have. And there, in the dim light of your own home, it becomes unmistakably clear. You're present, but you're absent. Awake, but not alive. Here, but unreachable, even to yourself. What you're experiencing isn't a failure of character. It's not a lack of willpower or discipline or passion. What's happening inside you is rooted in something far quieter and far more biological. The way the human nervous system adapts when it has been under too much pressure, for too long, without enough recovery in between. The brain is a survival organ first, and a feeling organ second. It has one primary job: keep you alive. Everything else, pleasure, joy, curiosity, excitement, is optional from its perspective. So, when the world becomes overwhelming or life demands more emotional energy than you have available, the brain makes an instinctive shift. It conserves power. It minimizes output. It shuts down non-essential systems to protect you from burning out completely. In simple terms, your emotional world goes dim because your nervous system is trying to save you. For many people, this dimming starts in the brain's reward circuits, areas shaped by dopamine, the neurotransmitter that signals motivation, anticipation, and emotional spark. Dopamine isn't the chemical of pleasure, it's the chemical of movement toward pleasure. It tells your brain, this matters, go toward it. When life becomes chronically overwhelming, this circuit doesn't stop working. It simply grows quieter, not broken, not empty, just muted. Imagine a car engine running at high RPM for miles and miles without rest. Eventually, the system reduces output to protect itself from overheating. Your brain does the same. When emotional stress, pressure, or internal conflict continues without a break, the reward pathways enter a kind of protective low-power mode. Things that used to light up the system, music, friendships, hobbies, even simple pleasures, no longer send strong signals. It's not because you've changed as a person. It's because your brain is trying to shield you from overload. At the same time, other parts of the nervous system begin altering how they function. The amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for threats, stays vigilant, even when you're exhausted. The prefrontal cortex, the place where you make meaning and decisions, becomes foggier, slower, less responsive, and deep in your parasympathetic system, the body shifts toward immobilization, a biological state where stillness takes the place of emotional movement. From the outside, you look calm. On the inside, you're shut down. This isn't dramatic, it's subtle, a slow shift, a quiet transition into a state designed to keep you going, even when your emotional reserves have been drained to the last drop. And maybe that's the part nobody tells you, that numbness isn't an absence of feelings, It's the presence of a nervous system doing everything it can to keep you afloat, even if that means turning down the volume on your inner world. You aren't malfunctioning. You aren't falling apart. You aren't losing yourself the way people fear. You're entering a physiological conservation mode. A mode the brain chooses when it believes you've been carrying too much, for too long, without enough help, warmth, or safety to support the emotional load. And once you understand this, once you realize this numbness is a response, not a flaw, you begin to see it differently. Not as a personal failure, but as a kind of signal, a message from deep within the system. You've been surviving too hard for too long. Let me take over for a while. There's a quiet shift that happens once you realize your emotional flatness isn't a moral failure, but a nervous system that has been running beyond its limits for too long. At first, it feels like nothing changes. You don't suddenly wake up feeling alive again. You don't suddenly remember how to hope, but something loosens, just a little. The pressure to fix yourself by force begins to melt. Because numbness isn't the opposite of emotion. It's the echo left behind when emotion has been running without rest. In American culture, we're taught to think of feelings as choices. Choose joy, choose discipline, choose motivation. But the brain doesn't operate on slogans. It operates on chemicals, thresholds, and survival. So, when you've spent years pushing yourself through college deadlines, unstable relationships, family expectations, financial pressure, hustle culture, or the quiet weight of simply staying functional in a world that keeps speeding up, your brain adapts. It begins reallocating resources into the systems that matter most for survival. And emotion is not one of them. That's why numbness feels like an unwanted visitor who moved in quietly. You don't notice the moment it arrives. You only notice when it's been there long enough to change the way the light hits the room. But there's a truth hiding beneath this shutdown. Your numbness isn't random. It's organized, intentional, a strategy. Your brain doesn't silence joy to punish you. It silences joy to conserve what little energy is left. It's the same mechanism that makes your phone dim its brightness when the battery drops to 1%. It's not broken, it's preserving itself. And the moment you understand this, your relationship with your own mind shifts. Numbness stops being the villain. It becomes the map. A map showing where your system has been overextended, where your boundaries eroded, where you tolerated more than your body could quietly hold. A map revealing the unspoken exhaustion built up over years of staying strong, adaptable, responsible, agreeable, self-sacrificing. When you expand the concept this way, numbness becomes less of a dead end and more of an X on the ground saying, "Start here. This is where you lost yourself." And recovering from numbness isn't about forcing emotion back. It's about rebuilding the foundation that emotion needs in order to return. It's about understanding that aliveness is not something you perform. It's something you allow. It's something that grows in systems that are safe, supported, rested, and seen. And if you listen closely beneath the quiet surface of your emotional shutdown, there is something still alive, a small, steady pulse that never left. It's waiting for you to stop trying to resurrect your old self and start creating the conditions your nervous system needed all along. Healing from numbness doesn't happen through intensity. It doesn't respond to dramatic resolutions, sudden life overhauls, or promises whispered at 2 a.m. It responds to quiet, consistent signals of safety. Think of your nervous system like a skittish animal. It doesn't return when you call loudly. It returns when the environment softens enough for it to trust again. So, instead of asking, "How do I feel more?" try asking, "What feels safe enough for my system to unfreeze by half an inch?" You don't rebuild emotional depth by adding pressure. You rebuild it by removing the threats your body still thinks it needs to guard against. Maybe that starts with something small. 5 minutes of doing something without a goal attached to it. Not self-improvement, not productivity, not a step toward your future, just something that is allowed to be purposeless. For someone who has been numb for years, purposelessness is medicine, because numbness thrives in environments where everything becomes a task, and recovery begins when something becomes a moment again. Then there's the truth about micro-movements. Your brain doesn't heal through breakthroughs. It heals through repetition, through slowly reintroducing signals that life is no longer a battlefield. A walk without headphones, sitting near a window for 5 minutes in the morning, letting yourself breathe out longer than you breathe in, leaving 1 hour of your evening untouched by screens. Tiny actions, repeated enough times, start to rebuild the circuitry your system shut down. And when emotions return, they usually don't return as joy. They return as irritation, sadness, or restlessness. Don't run from them. Those are the first signs of thawing, the nervous system waking up after a long freeze. Let them be messy. Let them be incomplete. Let them be small. You don't need to feel fully alive overnight. You only need enough aliveness to take the next step. And here's the quiet truth no one says out loud. Recovering from numbness is not about becoming a brighter version of yourself. It's about becoming a truer one who doesn't sprint past their limits, one who doesn't confuse emotional endurance with emotional abandonment, one who doesn't measure worth in output or productivity or speed, a self that isn't rebuilt but rediscovered. There will come a moment, somewhere in the slow, uneven process of healing, when you notice something subtle, a shift so small it might seem insignificant. Maybe it's the way sunlight lands on your desk, and for the first time in a long time, something inside you responds. Not joy, not yet, but recognition. A sense that your mind is no longer standing outside your life, watching through glass. A sense that the distance is shrinking. This is how emotional life returns, not dramatically, not all at once, but in brief flickers, small, fragile proofs that your system is waking up. And when that happens, don't cling to it. Don't demand more. Don't ask it to grow faster. Just honor it, the way you'd honor a fragile spark trying to survive in the wind. Because you're not rebuilding a damaged self. You're tending to a living one that adapted to survive and is now learning, slowly, quietly, how to live again. And maybe that's enough for now. Not a full emotional resurrection. Not a breakthrough, just a soft truth settling in your chest. You're still here, and something in you is finding its way back. A return that doesn't need to be rushed, a return that doesn't need to be perfect, a return that begins wherever you are in this moment, listening to the quiet hum of your own becoming.